This evening, and you're listening to a special election show with no numbers here on CBC Radio 1. Welcome if you're watching us on cbc.ca/Calgary and on our CBC Alberta YouTube page as well. We don't expect results until late tonight. At best, really. So we're more exploring the issues facing communities around southern Alberta as we wait for those tallies to come in. Another tally worth mentioning, because I know there are some split allegiances this evening. It is 3-1 Seattle in the seventh inning. So there are a couple of different races to keep an eye on this evening here across Alberta. So let's head over next to of course our rural watcher as well, because there are so many towns and cities voting in southern Alberta tonight. Albertans in rural areas also voting for county councils. Joining us here in studio to share a couple of those races and the issues in those regions, CBC's Andrew Jeffrey. Hi.
Hey, Paul.
Nice to have you in here.
Thanks.
So tell us about some of the elections playing out differently across the southern part of the province here.
Well, across Alberta, people have gone to the polls today. It's true in the big cities, small towns, rural counties. Everywhere in Alberta, the democratic process is playing out here today. You know, it's true whether you live in Irvine, in the Crow's Nest Pass, here in Calgary, all around the province. If you define southern Alberta as anything south of Red Deer, that includes 6 cities, around 45 towns, as well as roughly 20 counties. And here at CBC Calgary, we try to keep our eye on everything happening in southern Alberta. In a lot of towns and villages with smaller populations, it might be more common to have more candidates that are running unopposed, that are acclaimed to their role. So that's how you see democracy play out a little bit differently in different places here. We notice a couple municipalities where that's especially interesting. In the municipal district of Pincher Creek tonight, as well as in the county of 40 Mile, all the council seats are acclaimed. So there's no reason for people to go to the polls today. All the council candidates were running unopposed. But, and this is kind of fun. By contrast, over in Clearwater County, population of roughly 11,000, there's more than 20 candidates running across 7 competitive council races.
Wow. Interesting.
And, up in Stettler, near Red Deer, residents there haven't cast a vote for mayor in 15 years. They've had 3 straight municipal elections where, 2 different mayors ran unopposed over the course of that time. So people there are going to the polls to be able to choose their mayor for the first time in 15 years. It's pretty incredible.
That is incredible, yeah.
So all that is just to say that these races don't play out identically in Calgary and Edmonton as they do in every municipality around the province. And how you elect leaders is different depending on where you live. So in cities and towns and villages, you vote for a councillor, you vote for a mayor. In rural areas, there's often another step there. Take Foothills County, which is comprised of 7 electoral divisions, each one represented by their own councillor. Tonight, folks there will vote for their council candidate for their ward. Mm-hmm. And then the victorious councillors will form council, and they'll choose a reeve to sort of lead that council. Reeve acts as a mayor does in terms of representing the council in interprovincial relationships and also chairing those meetings with the rest of the councillors. So again, it's all just to say these things work differently in different places in the province.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting to hear the process of getting a reeve. Yeah, very interesting. One of the counties, of course, that you've been looking into more closely in southern Alberta, it's an interesting race based on the fact that water has become a real issue in that area. Tell us about it.
I think this is something true for a lot of southern Alberta communities that have had to deal with drought in recent years. Improved water security becomes more of an election issue at the municipal level. So Cypress County in southeastern Alberta, surrounding Medicine Hat, that's one prime example of this. Back in July, they declared a state of local agricultural disaster for the 4th time in the last 5 years because crops there weren't getting enough moisture. Several councillors who are running today, they've been talking about how the county needs better support for its farmers, be able to provide better access to water for the whole county. And while drought conditions in that county have lessened this fall, it was still a particularly hot, dry, difficult summer for the county there. And of course, agriculture is a primary major industry there. That's what's driving, I'm sure, a lot of votes in that county there today. I'm sure it's true of a lot of southern Alberta dealing with similar issues.
No ag without water. And major issue in a lot of parts of the province for sure. Let's talk about the more populated towns in southern Alberta. What are some of the examples of issues that voters are really keeping an eye on as they cast ballots today.
Yeah, and this is going to sound very familiar for Calgarians here, but the sheer amount of growth that Alberta is seeing is also being felt in some of the surrounding communities around Calgary. It's being felt all around the province, but as much as we talk about how much Calgary is growing and Alberta as a whole expecting to hit 5 million people, or did hit 5 million people earlier this year, we're seeing the effects of growth in a lot of other communities. So take Airdrie, for example. It's the fifth largest city in Alberta. It's the fastest growing city in the province. It's on track to hit 100,000 people in the next 7 years. Some of the issues that voters are concerned about naturally comes from that growth. People want to see councillors that have a well thought out plan for how they'll address that growth, whether it comes to more community spaces for skating or swimming. How do we attract more business to keep up with the population growth, or revitalizing that city's downtown? Those are all some of the topics that people have been talking about leading up to this election. Over in Okotoks, it's a similar issue where people are talking about concerns with growth heading into this election. Some candidates worry that town is growing too quickly. Others want to ensure housing needs for new residents are met. That's a very familiar issue for Calgarians here.
Okay. Good stuff, Andrew. I know we got tons of details to go through here.
Way too much to go through.
And you're going to join us again to look through some other communities here a little later in the hour. Thanks for this.
Thanks so much, Paul.
Andrew Jeffrey here in studio. Yes, he'll be talking about some of the covering, races in smaller cities, towns, counties here in southern Alberta for us through the hour. And hey, let's bring it back to Calgary, shall we? Because Scott Dipple's with me, former municipal affairs reporter for CBC Calgary, longtime watcher of all things political. And earlier we talked to Scott about infrastructure as an issue. Another big issue this time around in Calgary and beyond, very much on voters' minds, according to polling data, public safety and crime. And I'm wondering, with all of your many elections under your belt here, Scott, is it playing a larger role this time, public safety, than we've seen in past elections?
I think it's much more of a topic of discussion, but I can honestly say there has probably always been a discussion about public safety, particularly in downtowns. I think back to when Dave Bronconnier was mayor of Calgary. The city actually started something called Clean to the Core, which was a program to deal with social disorder in downtown Calgary. So what's old is new again. What's different this time is obviously having been through the pandemic experience, and we saw this in the 2021 election, that there was, there were fewer people back then that were downtown on a daily basis, fewer people taking transit, and people taking refuge on transit as a place to keep warm, or it was a place where they could use drugs and they could hope to have somebody would see them if there was an overdose situation. So the crime situation has definitely changed. Calgary facing that drug crisis like every other major city and a lot of smaller centers in Canada. That it fuels both petty crime and also violent crime on the streets. While crime overall is down from years past, there's still a problem with people's feelings and perceptions of a lack of safety on streets, particularly downtown. When you see things like open drug use, the petty crime, homelessness, which makes people feel uncomfortable, it all destroys confidence in downtown as a place to be or a place to go.
And I mean, the thing is, saying that you're going to be tough on public safety and crime on the election trail is one thing, but it's a really complicated issue, right? I mean, how do winning candidates actually deliver on this?
Well, there seems to be the popular notion is to address that perception of there's a crime problem, we need to deal with it. In recent years, it seems to have shifted to we need boots on the ground. We need visibility from the police. We have seen increases in the number of officers. The province gave Calgary and Edmonton, $50 million each to hire more police officers. The city, through council initiatives, has been hiring more transit peace officers. So, it's widely acknowledged that more needs to be done even as the population downtown is increasing with the conversion of empty office space into residential units. So there are more people, more eyes on the streets. But
I'm glad you bring up downtown, because one of the things that a lot of mayoral candidates have brought up in this campaign so far is this desire to bring back a downtown police station. What's the backstory here? What's the history?
So, Calgary did have a downtown police presence. The headquarters of the Calgary Police Service moved to the northeast. And so then you're left with a district office, which was sort of in Victoria Park in Beltline, but, south of the CPKC tracks, right? So then it closed and moved slightly further out into Ramsey. When you don't have a police station or a headquarters downtown, you lose automatically just officers circulating through the core area of the city. So the city did arrange to bring back, like through the police commission, a reporting desk, which is right in downtown. But still, we have heard during this campaign, the idea that we need like a downtown police station, and so you'd get that increased officer circulation.
Yeah,
they
cars,
would see things.
Police cars driving into the garage and seeing stuff as they pull in, whatever.
As they go to and from wherever it is that they're going, but they're heading back. Or starting out their shifts downtown.
Right. Okay. Interesting, Scott. Thanks.
Okay, you're welcome.
Scott Dipple with me all through the hour here in the studio, and as we continue to explore the election issues in southern Alberta. And we are off now to Medicine Hat. That's where Eli Ritter is standing by. Eli, of course, one of our reporters in our new Medicine Hat Bureau. Eli, where are you?
Good evening, Paul. I'm in City Hall in downtown Medicine Hat. This has been the site of much conflict and division over the last 2 years that has made provincial headlines. Hatters hit the polls today. There were long lines and even longer wait times. I spoke to a woman at Medicine Hat College who said she had been waiting and moving around to different polling stations looking for a shorter line because she had mobility issues. She couldn't stay in line for very long because of those. But she wanted to make sure that her vote counted because it's been a vote of change. And we'll see if that's indicative of a larger voter turnout, but that'll come in the coming days, Paul.
Okay, Medicine Hat, I mean, you touched on this a bit, Eli, but it's facing what some are calling the political reset tonight, which sounds pretty dire. Break it down here more for us. What's happened in Medicine Hat and Council of late?
That's right, Paul. It's the political reset. So let me explain. Let's go back in time a little bit. It's been a rocky time between the mayor, the city manager, and council. There were accusations and counter-accusations about personal conduct. A conflict between Mayor Lindsay Clark and city manager Ann Mitchell spilled out into a public meeting in this very chamber in August 2023. That led to allegations that Mayor Clark broke council's code of conduct, and it triggered a third-party investigation. Now, in March 2024, a few months later, council found Clark guilty of misconduct and placed sanctions on her mayoral powers while cutting her salary in half. Mayor Clark, in response, took the city of Medicine Hat to court and later that summer was able to reverse most of the sanctions, get her salary back. However, the judge still found that she committed misconduct. Soon after that, council agreed to request a municipal inspection from Alberta's Municipal Affairs Ministry. That came back in July and described an untenable working environment due to the conflict between Mayor Clark, CAO Ann Mitchell, and council. It said the city was managed in an improper manner. So people here are looking for a reset at City Hall. As for what that will look like, how many incumbents will come back, well, that's what we're waiting on tonight in the hours to come or the days to come, Paul.
So let's talk about, as you say, we wait here to see if we've got this whole new council coming into Medicine Hat. What can you tell us about the candidates and their campaigns here, Eli?
Yeah, there are 45 candidates running for city council. That's 6 for mayor and 39 councillor candidates. That's the most, at least this century, that we know of. Of course, in the mayor's race, there's Lindsay Clark, who's the incumbent mayor. She says she wants to continue her mission of increasing transparency and accountability at City Hall. It's work that she wants to keep going for the next 4 years. One of her opponents, Drew Barnes, is a former Wild Rose MLA. He says he's running on stopping what he calls chaos at City Hall. And he's proposing various policies, one of them a 3-year tax freeze. Andy McGrogan is an outgoing councillor and a former police chief. He says he wants to be a stable hand leading city council up to the last 4 years. He says the last 4 years really have been a training lesson for how to be a good mayor for him. And then there's Krish Samraj, a former councillor during the COVID term. He says he wants to bring experience he gained working for Alberta municipalities to the role of mayor, and he promises strategic long-term thinking. Alan Rose is a second-time mayoral candidate and business owner. He says his main priority is to attract business to Medicine Hat and boost the economy. Finally, there's Mark Fisher, who works in the oil and gas industry. He says he believes he can be a great leader to the city and to the 8 councillors that are joining him around the Horseshoe. There's also 3 incumbents that are running for re-election around the Horseshoe as well.
Okay. We talked there about how council operates being really a major issue here in this campaign, Eli. But beyond governance, what else is getting talked about on the campaign trail?
Yeah, one of the other big issues is the plight of Medicine Hat's vulnerable people. So earlier this year, Medicine Hat's Planning Authority denied a permit from the Mustard Seed for its Community Impact Center that would have validated it and made it so that it could continue operating. It denied that permit, so it had to shut down this community center, which was essential for people to go to during the daytime, access mail services, meals, and most importantly, a warm place to be when it's minus 40 degrees out. So that triggered an effort to find a new location for the Mustard Seed that would take both its 30-bed shelter and those daytime services, combine it into one building. They came close. So at the end of the summer, there was a proposal for taking an old labor hall on the city's outskirts and turning that into the location. But there was some backlash from businesses. And so they postponed the entire effort until after the election. So when this new council comes in, one of the first things they're going to have to deal with in November is this effort to find a new location for the Mustard Seed. And there's a lot of pressure from the community to move quickly so that they have somewhere to go. Medicine Hat's vulnerable people have somewhere to go during the winter months, during the day.
Right. Eli, great to have you on, right from council chambers as well, we should say. You got right into the heart of the action there, my friend.
Yep.
Nice to have you on. That's Eli Ritter. And of course, while we've been hearing some overlap in issues tonight, we're also hearing about some pretty unique situations, not unlike what we've heard in Medicine Hat there. Eli Ritter covering that election for us in tonight and in the days ahead. Now, on election night, we are all electing local government. But a lot of the focus, of course, is on the position of mayor. Certainly true here in Calgary. So let's get more on that from our municipal affairs reporter, Acton Clarkin, who's down at the Big Four, where much of the counting is happening today in Calgary. Acton, let's talk about the mayoral race here in Calgary. How has it played out from what you've seen?
Well, up until tonight even, it's really a lot of candidates race that they're still in it. Anyone could win. Any one of maybe these top 5 polling candidates who we've talked about in the show. But I just want to give the audience a gentle reminder that the mayor only has 1 vote on council in Calgary. There are 14 wards, 14 councillors have a vote. And it means that the mayor can't really accomplish much on their own. They need a majority of votes, council support to pass anything that comes their way. So these campaign pitches that mayoral candidates have been making, they're not guarantees. I just want to make sure that that's clear. But what the mayor lacks in, I guess you could call power on paper or legislative power, they make up for in influence. They really are the face of a city. They chair council meetings. They keep the agenda moving. If some big international event happens, guess who's there? It's Calgary's mayor. In terms of provincial or federal meetings, something to do with Calgary, it's Calgary's mayor who's there representing the city, who's sometimes even negotiating on behalf of the city, Paul. It's really an important role.
I wanted to hear what folks who you've spoken with over months now, Acton, have been telling you about, everyday Calgarians, about how the campaigns are resonating with them. What have you heard, specifically on the mayoral front?
Well, I think a big theme has been these municipal political parties that have come up. So new for this election, people running for mayor and for council, for that matter, they can be part of these political parties. And there are 2 mayoral candidates who have been running with the party, Sonia Sharp and Brian Thiessen, and they've sort of become the informal leaders of these parties as well. So maybe we can just do a quick whip around of the top mayoral candidates, starting with the ones in those parties. So Sonia Sharp with the Communities First Party, she describes it as a centrist party. Now Sharp has been the Ward 1 councillor for the last 4 years, and there was a lot of I would call early optimism in her camp. She rented out this big campaign headquarters on 9th Ave on the edge of downtown, very visible from day one. It had signs up with her face on them saying "Sharp for Mayor" from really early on, and she was definitely one of the most visible candidates, I think, throughout this campaign with signage and branding. It would be hard to not see her face on one of those blue signs. Now, Brian Thiessen, he's running with the Calgary Party. Thiessen also describes the party as centrist, and he's a lawyer, former chair of the Calgary Police Commission. That's a body that provides, I guess, civilian oversight for the police. And his party was also very organized from the get-go with messaging and values. The overall branding for the Calgary Party candidates was coordinated. They all had similar websites and signage. Now, the independents, let's go to those in alphabetical order. Jeff Davison, former city councillor, he ran for mayor in 2021. Obviously wasn't successful, but he's positioned himself as a business-minded leader, one who he says he's someone who can look out for the little guy. Jeremy Farkas, also a former city councillor, also ran for mayor in 2021, came in second place, losing to Jyoti Gondek, obviously. Now, in debates, he's taken a bit of criticism from his competitors. Some people who have worked with him on council before say he seems like maybe a different guy, that he's flip-flopped on some issues that he once had different opinions on. Now, he says he's a changed person and he's learned a lot in his last years. Jyoti Gondek, the incumbent, as I said earlier, the mayor can be the face of a city, and she's taken some heat. As the face of a city, she's there for the good times and the bad. The water main break stands out as one where maybe there was, a bit of criticism thrown her way, but she's also talked a lot throughout this campaign about her positive qualities and the way she can stand up to the province. And she's used the Green Line as an example. And in terms of momentum for all these folks, recent polling we had done said Farkas was up top, followed closely by Sharp and Gondek, and Davison and Thiessen running out the list there.
Acton,
There's a lot of undecided voters.
Yeah,
And it'll be
it's very interesting to see how they're going to go over the next. We may have a result on mayor by 11 p.m. It could be later, but this was really insightful. Thanks for this.
Thank you.
Acton Clark in there, and as you listen or watch us this evening to our special election show with no numbers, because yes, the results are going to come a little bit later than when we sign off at 9 p.m., but we're so glad to have you along on CBC Radio 1, cbc.ca/Calgary as well, if you'd like to join the watch party or the CBC Alberta YouTube page. Why no numbers? Well, thousands of folks right now hand counting the ballots. New rules are in place from the province, and yeah, that takes time. I was watching an elections video on the process, Scott Dipple. Extremely time-consuming, and it kind of reminded me somewhere in between a complicated game of bridge and pin the tail on the donkey or something. There was a lot of movement going on around the table as these ballots were counted by hand.
Yeah, it's a heck of a process, and it's a municipal election is, well, in a city the size of Calgary, quite unlike a federal election or a provincial election in that there are several elections going on at the same time. Voters are choosing a new mayor, they're choosing new councillors, they're choosing trustees for a public and a Catholic school system. So it's really 4 different elections going on at the same time.
And just briefly here, Acton talked to us about the mayoral campaign. You've got an interesting fact about incumbent mayors in Calgary who often have a very good shot.
Yes, in local politics, we always say that name recognition is probably the biggest part of the whole affair. The last time that Calgarians tossed out an incumbent mayor was in 1980 when Ross Alger was defeated by a young upstart by the name of Ralph Klein.
How about that? That's going back a ways, isn't it?
So we're going to have we'll have to see what becomes of this mayor's race, obviously, given the challenges that Jyoti Gondek has faced during her time in office. But we already know it's going to be a very different looking council after this election. There will be at least 8 new faces, guaranteed, given how many existing members say they're not running.
Yeah, right. No matter what the issue, no matter what the outcome, rather, the issues remain the same, and that's what we're exploring tonight. The issues on which voters throughout southern Alberta are casting their ballots. And on that note, let's head over to Canmore, where the CBC's Michelle McCann joins us, who's part of our new CBC Bow Valley Bureau. Michelle, where do we find you?
Hi, Paul. So I'm actually just outside of the Canmore Recreation Centre. It's where the voting's happening, and also where volunteers are counting the final ballots for Town Council. Right now, it's pretty quiet here. When I first got here, the parking lot was bustling. I had a hard time finding parking myself, and the lineup to vote was all the way to the end of the hallway. I was talking to the municipal clerk a little earlier, and she was saying that turnout looks to be about the same as it was in the last election. But the stakes are high for this town of 17,000 people. It's a small population, but there are big pressures coming from the millions of people who visit here every year, and tourism is only expected to grow in the coming years.
Let's talk about housing more, Michelle, because that's a huge election issue this time around, and how to tax those homes. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so the people who serve in this town, so baristas, hospitality workers, hotel workers, they're really struggling with the cost of living here. And the biggest pressure, like you said, is housing. Canmore has the most expensive housing market in Alberta and a really tight housing supply. So to tackle this, Town Council came up with a plan, and it was to build more non-market housing for workers that live here, and they're calling it the livability tax. And the premise is, if you own a home in Canmore, it must be your primary residence, and if not, you will be taxed at 0.4% of the assessed value of your home. Obviously, secondary homeowners are not happy about this. They feel like it's unfair and arbitrary, and the province has actually just stepped in as well. The Premier is asking for a plan to block local taxes on vacation homes. But even if the tax dies, the problem doesn't, and that's how to fund housing for workers that they can afford.
Such a tricky topic for these politicians who are running, Michelle, because no matter where they land, a large portion of Canmore will not like their position. So what have candidates been saying about this issue as they try to find that sweet spot?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, there's 12 people running for 7 council seats, and then there's 5 incumbents that are seeking re-election, and the incumbent councillors, they created this tax, and so obviously they support it, and their main point is that they've tried everything else. They're out of options, and this is really the only tool they have left to build affordable housing for residents that live here. And then, so the challengers, some of them just completely want it eliminated. Others want alternative solutions to be explored. And then when it comes to the mayoral contenders, there's incumbent Sean Krauser, and then there's the former councillor Ed Russell. Krauser was part of the council that created the tax, and Russell opposes it. So it's a mixed bag, and there's a lot of emotions involved in this. But from the community itself, I'm hearing that there's an appetite for new faces to join this council, just to get some more fresh ideas on how to deal with some of these long-standing issues on housing. And there is one incumbent that decided not to run again, so there is at least one seat up for grabs.
Okay, Michelle, really interesting to have you coming into the show here this evening and telling us about what's going on in Canmore. Thanks for this.
Thank you.
It's Michelle McCann in Canmore tonight. Yeah, so housing, a huge election issue there, but in so many other parts of the province as well. Too many homes. Too few homes, the wrong kind of home, too expensive. Just one of the many hotly debated parts of this election around our province that we're digging into this evening. Let's get Andrew Jeffrey back into the mix here. He's with us through the hour to look at races in the more rural areas of southern Alberta. Welcome back.
Good to see you, Paul.
Nice to have you on. So let's head down to the Crow's Nest Pass. I was talking with an author on Daybreak a couple of weeks back who has written a book just recently about the history of Crow's Nest Pass Town Council in the 1930s that had gone communist, which I don't think we're going to see this time around. I think that's safe to say.
I don't think that's going to be a popular sentiment there in the town. I don't think it's going to come out of the vote here today. But we are talking about something that has sort of captured the interest in Crow's Nest Pass and around Crow's Nest Pass in Alberta over the last several years, that being a debate around coal mining in the Rockies. The Grassy Mountain coal mining project near Crow's Nest Pass, that has a long and contentious history. A non-inviting vote among residents last fall supported the project, but there's a lot of environmental concerns, obviously, around coal mining in the Rockies that draws interest from around the province to that area. And you see some election issues that if they're not directly about coal mining, they're related to this kind of debate. Candidates who pitch themselves as having the best ideas for attracting industry and business to the region. Other candidates who talk about wanting to protect the natural environment and still draw tourism to the area while, having an interest in business. These are some of the major election issues for voters in the Crow's Nest Pass. But those aren't the only issues on the table. We were talking earlier about how democracy looks different in different parts of Alberta. And Crow's Nest Pass is kind of a good example of this, where there's talk among candidates there about moving away from the current at-large system where residents across the region choose from one pool of candidates. Instead, some candidates want to shift to a ward system before the next municipal election, where similar to what we have in Calgary, where you vote for a councillor to represent you in your ward, as a way to sort of have better direct representation within the municipality. So again, it's maturing democracy there. Democracy is at play all around Alberta today.
Right. Yeah. We've seen many iterations of that in the Crow's Nest Pass over the years. You've also been looking into High River and an issue there that's proving common across a lot of small towns in Alberta. What's going on?
So in High River, a town of roughly 15,000 people, they're facing a shortage of doctors, something that's common for a lot of small towns that are trying to attract and retain medical professionals. Olds, for instance, is another town that has formed a committee, worked really hard to try and attract and retain doctors there as well. In High River, Craig Snodgrass is running for his fourth term as mayor tonight. His long-term top priority is communicating to voters a need to bring in and keep more doctors and introduce incentives to bring those physicians in. Other candidates are also running for council positions, though they're also citing a need to bring in doctors and improve healthcare services, but they're also looking at other issues. They're talking about how there needs to be some more, transparency on council, and that's something that we're seeing a lot in a lot of municipalities around southern Alberta. Candidates talking about what are the best practices to have transparency on council and have council connect with and engage with voters more, so voters know more what's happening on council. As I was looking at a lot of towns and rural counties around the province, you see these kind of concerns raised a lot about council not engaging directly with enough voters. In some places, candidates say residents want council to meet in camera less often or have more discussions on the public record. In other municipalities, they may feel residents' voices and wishes aren't really being listened to enough. So this is a concern and complaint to hear in a lot of places around the province.
Okay. And, we have just a brief amount of time here, but I want to wrap up on something that's kind of fun here because, of course, a giant faux gargantuan dinosaur has wound up rearing its head in the municipal election in Drumheller as well.
Yeah, wrap up quickly in the dinosaur capital of the world, where there are plans to potentially remove Tyra the Tyrannosaur, this 25-meter high Tyrannosaurus Rex that has been, along with the Royal Trail Museum, a real center of tourism in the town there. AJ Frey, he's a businessman running behind a petition to keep that T-Rex, or he has a petition to keep the T-Rex in town. And he is running for a council position. Someone from the Chamber of Commerce is running for mayor in that town as well, and that chamber is looking to remove the Tyrannosaurus Rex. So they might end up having to work together and talk this out over the next few years.
Yeah, there's going to be some chatting there for sure. Andrew, thanks for all of this.
Thanks so much, Paul.
Really interesting. Andrew Jeffy in studio with me. Yeah, so often it comes down to cold, hard cash, doesn't it? And for more on that, Scott Dipple back with us in the studio.
Yes. Well, of course, there's always heightened concerns about taxes and spending as a result of higher inflation that we've all been experiencing in recent years. While inflation has eased in some places, there's still an affordability crisis for many people who see their earnings not keeping up with the increasing costs of many staples from, groceries, utilities, taxes, anything you can buy. So, when people move to cities like Calgary, guess what? They don't bring their police officers, firefighters, libraries, and buses with them. So,
That's a line we've heard Jeremy Farkas bring up a number of times.
Absolutely. And, this puts a lot of pressure on local budgets, with ever-spiraling costs of maintaining infrastructure and replacing it when it ages out. So many places in Alberta, they have competitive tax rates compared to other places in Canada, but if you don't live elsewhere, that kind of rings hollow.
Yeah.
Tough for councils to deal with this when the province increases education property taxes. So, yeah, a lot for local councils to balance in the years ahead.
And you know what? Another issue that has been front and center for some Calgarians, not all Calgarians, if you look at the polling data, zoning and blanket rezoning. Acton Clarkin joins us one last time with a look at what has been a contentious issue for some. Acton?
Well, last year, council passed these new rules that make it easier for some multi-story, multi-unit homes to be built in places where maybe there was only a single-family home before. So the voices are loud. Arguments for are that it could create more housing, could potentially bring home prices down if it, builds enough to sort of strengthen the housing supply. Arguments against changes the way that neighborhoods look, and it could put a strain on infrastructure. So lots of people voicing their opinions. We've heard candidates talk about it a lot. I've heard people talk to me about it a lot. It's definitely a contentious issue is probably the best way to put it, Paul.
Certainly, and one that Scott has had all kinds of different takes on the campaign trail. We'll see which one most resonated with voters. What a pleasure having, Acton, you on in your new role as our municipal affairs reporter. Scott, that was your old job.
Yes.
How great to have you in here.
Nice to be here in the studio.
And my goodness, thanks to all of our reporters in Lethbridge, Canmore, Banff, Medicine Hat, and beyond for making the issues that matter most to Albertans, putting them front and center here with you this evening. And while I get ready to sign off on this show, stay with us because, of course, CBC is following the election results all through the night and first thing in the morning. We expect there at least to be a Calgary mayor, perhaps by 11 p.m. We'll know more about that and council tomorrow. cbc.ca/Calgary or on CBC Radio tonight and tomorrow for the latest. Thanks for spending your time with us here on Radio 1 on this election special. I'm Paul Karchut. That was fun. And now, it's all down to the voting. Have a good night. Counting.